History classes teach you about Cleopatra. They teach you about Elizabeth, about Catherine the Great, about Joan of Arc. But what about Amina of Zazao? What about Nzinga of Ndongo and Matamba? What about Makeda of Sheba, or Kandake Amanirenas, or Ye Asantewa? These were not women behind the scenes. They were rulers, warriors, strategists, symbols of power. Africa's queens were not fairy tales. They were the force behind kingdoms, the authors of victories and the heart of empires. Today we uncover the true stories of the African queens who shaped the world. Long before the world was ready, in the 16th century in what is now northern Nigeria, a young princess trained with soldiers instead of servants. Her name was Amina, and by the time she became Queen of Zazao, she had transformed into a battlefield legend. Amina wasn't content with defending borders. She expanded them. For over 30 years, she led her army, some say over 20,000 soldiers, across vast territories, conquering cities and demanding tribute from kings. She was known to sleep in the camps with her troops. She built fortified walls around cities, many of which still exist. She brought wealth and innovation to the Hausa people. In a patriarchal society, she proved that leadership bowed to ability, not gender. The Hausa saying still goes, Amina, daughter of Nikatau, a woman as capable as a man. But she wasn't as capable, she was more. In the 17th century Angola, as Portuguese colonizers expanded the slave trade, one woman rose to fight for her people, not just with swords but with words. Queen Nzinga of Ndongo and Matamba was both a warrior and a master strategist. When the Portuguese tried to humiliate her during peace talks by not offering a chair, she sat on the back of her servant to look them in the eye. That moment became legend, but her resistance was real. Nzinga converted to Christianity as a tactic. She adopted Portuguese names to delay invasions. She built alliances with escaped slaves and neighboring tribes. She fought battles into her 60s and for over 30 years kept colonial forces at bay. To her enemies, she was stubborn. To her people, she was salvation. You've heard of Julius Caesar. You've heard of Augustus. But did you hear about the one-eyed African queen who went to war with Rome and won? Her name was Amanirenas, a Kandake, queen mother of the Kushite kingdom in modern-day Sudan. Around 25 BCE, Rome had just conquered Egypt and assumed the south would fall easily. They were wrong. Amanirenas launched a surprise invasion, captured Roman cities, and even defaced statues of Emperor Augustus. Rome retaliated. They sent thousands of soldiers, but Amanirenas refused to surrender. She led counterattacks from fortress cities and eventually forced a peace treaty, one of the few Rome ever agreed to with a sovereign African state. No tribute, no submission. Full recognition of Kushite power. Often erased from both African and biblical history, Maka was a queen mother of royal African lineage who ruled in ancient Israel. She held power during the reign of her son and grandson, and is one of the few women in the Bible noted to have had political authority in a kingdom. Her presence shows how African influence extended far beyond the Nile and the Sahara into ancient Judea and Canaan. Though eventually overthrown, her legacy proves the spiritual and political presence of African queens in ancient Middle Eastern society. Her story has been overlooked but not forgotten. You've heard whispers of her name in holy books. Makeda, Queen of Sheba. She ruled a wealthy African kingdom, likely in Ethiopia or Yemen, and journeyed to meet King Solomon, bringing gold, spices, and wisdom. But the biblical version barely scratches the surface. In Ethiopian tradition, Makeda did not just visit Solomon, she outwitted him. She tested his wisdom. She returned pregnant, with a son who would become Menelik I, the first emperor of Ethiopia's Solomonic dynasty. That dynasty would last for nearly 3,000 years, culminating in Haile Selassie. Makeda wasn't just a queen, she was the mother of the Ethiopian monarchy, and perhaps the reason Ethiopia remained uncolonized for centuries. In 1900, when British colonialists tried to take the Golden Stool, the sacred throne of the Ashanti Empire in Ghana, men hesitated, but one woman didn't. Ya Asantewa, a grandmother and queen mother, stood before the Ashanti Council and said, "If you men will not go forward, then we will. We, the women, will fight." And she did. She led the last war against British colonization in Ashanti lands. With spears and strategy, she organized guerrilla warfare and held off colonial forces for months. She was eventually captured and exiled, but her resistance inspired generations. Today, schools, monuments, and festivals bear her name. She proved that African queens didn't just wear crowns. They defended them. So why don't we learn about these queens? Because colonial history had one mission: to make Africa seem powerless, tribal, male-dominated, silent. Powerful African women disrupted that lie. They ruled nations, defeated generals, built cities, preserved culture, commanded spiritual and military authority, so their stories were hidden or recast as myths or dismissed as legends. But now we reclaim them. From the deserts of Sudan to the mountains of Ethiopia, from Nigeria to Ghana to Angola, the legacy of African queens is etched in stone, sung in song, whispered in folklore, and now spoken aloud. They were mothers, warriors, diplomats, generals, priestesses, pharaohs. They didn't wait for permission to lead. They didn't rule behind men. They ruled because they could, because they had to, because Africa raised them that way. This is Echoes of Africa. And these are the queens who shaped the world.